Hello, and welcome to the IRIS Community Partners training module that focuses on immigration statuses of our IRIS clients. Barb and Cindy, two members of the IRIS Community Partners admin team, will present the immigration pathways that IRIS clients have followed to arrive in Connecticut. Please note that this is not an exhaustive list for how immigrants arrive to the U.S., but an overview of the immigration statuses held by the families that an ICP volunteer may encounter. So during this presentation, we'll describe the different types of immigration statuses, the documentation that goes with each, and the ability of IRIS's clients to access public benefits and employment opportunities. One very important note to keep in mind as we review this information is much of what we will share is changing regularly with the implementation of new federal policies and pending litigation. By the time we record this video and share it, some part of what we review will more than likely become outdated. At the end of the presentation, we'll therefore share the websites of organizations that have been doing an amazing job summarizing current information in real time, so you can stay updated on new developments. Finally, throughout the presentation, we'll also share examples of the immigration documents that you may be seeing when you are assisting IRIS clients.
Thank you, Cindy. So here are the common immigration statuses for IRIS clients. Most of the clients ICP volunteers work with have refugee status. Obtaining this status begins when an individual or family flees their homeland and enter a second country. After they determine it is not safe to go back to their homeland, and the second country that has given them temporary safety will not be able to offer them a permanent home, they can apply for refugee status with the United Nations or sometimes a local embassy. A rigorous application process ensues, and if it is determined they qualify for refugee status, they are then referred to a third country for resettlement. If this third country is the United States, another round of vetting begins when they apply to U.S. RAP or the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program. This process can take years, but if approved, the family is welcomed to the U.S. by one of the national resettlement agencies, who then assign the family to one of their affiliate agencies around the country. IRIS has been an affiliate of Church World Service, and the refugee families that have already arrived to the U.S. have been welcomed by IRIS through this pathway. The current administration has suspended the U.S. RAP program with very limited exceptions for the time being. One of those exceptions are special immigrant visa holders. Special immigrant visas are granted to those from Iraq or Afghanistan who have worked with the U.S. military. Obtaining this visa is an involved application process. Those who have secured one are still allowed to travel to the U.S. and receive support from a resettlement agency, but they must arrange their own travel. IRIS continues to welcome SIVs who are able to make their way to New Haven. IRIS also works with immigrants who are parolees, which means they have arrived through a humanitarian parole program. This is a specific program allowing individuals to enter and temporarily reside in the U.S. for urgent humanitarian reasons or significant public benefit. It can be granted to individuals for life-saving medical procedures, to attend funerals, or to individuals who have been asked to testify in a court proceeding. It can also be granted to specific populations. Recipients are required to leave when the parole period expires unless they secure another immigration status or apply for reparole. Populations who have arrived to the U.S. through this pathway include Hungarians. In 1956, after an unsuccessful revolution against communism in Hungary, 20 member countries of the UN accepted Hungarian refugees. Expansive use of presidential parole power under the Immigration and Naturalization Act set a precedent, followed by succeeding administrations to the present day. During the Vietnam War era, humanitarian parole was used to welcome those fleeing dire circumstances in Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos, as well as Cubans who are fleeing the oppressive regime in Cuba. More recently, Afghans have been welcomed as parolees, 200,000 total since the Taliban takeover, while 76,000 were welcomed after the initial evacuation wave in August of 2021. Also, Ukrainians have been welcomed through the United for Ukraine program, and Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans were welcomed through the process for CHNV. All of these populations were granted humanitarian parole, and IRIS has worked with many individuals who arrived through these programs. Another term you may have heard is temporary protected status. This is different from humanitarian parole. It is usually used to protect immigrants from deportation who already reside in the U.S. but cannot return to their home country due to conflict, natural disaster, or other life-threatening emergency situations. Immigrants who are already on U.S. soil can apply for a more permanent legal status by applying for asylum. Similar to applying for refugee status, this is a long, involved legal process for those who cannot return to their home country. If their application is approved, they are granted asylee status. Undocumented neighbors are those individuals who cross the U.S. southern border or overstay a visa. If they are here because they are fleeing violence, persecution, or life-threatening circumstances in their homeland, they are able to apply for asylum. Not all immigrants who cross the border or overstay a visa qualify to apply for asylum, but this is a significant portion of the population that is commonly referred to as undocumented in the United States. To quickly review, the clients an ICP volunteer will work with fall into these categories. Most clients have refugee status or arrived with SIV status. Others have arrived through specific humanitarian parole programs, or they have been granted asylum asylee status by applying for asylum. They may also be undocumented neighbors. Now we will move on to look at the types of documentation each population receives and the implication for public benefits. Documentation and public benefits. An immigrant status has several implications for their lives in the U.S. The documentation that provides proof of their status to social service agencies, employers, and others varies between these statuses. This chart will help us break it down. The document that applies to almost all of the immigrant populations we have reviewed is the I-94 document. This is an arrival and departure record generated by U.S. Customs and Border Control. It is a government-issued document that confirms an individual's immigration status. These can be accessed online from the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, or USCIS website. Every immigrant should have a printed out version of this document accessible. As you can see in this example, the I-94 includes the individual's class of admission, which indicates legal immigration status and the specific category they fall into. The RE in this example denotes refugee status. There are too many class of admission categories to review here, but they can easily be looked up on the USCIS website or on other immigration legal resource sites. Volunteers who are assisting an IRIS client who need support in accessing their I-94 can ask their team leader or an ICP admin for directions and tips on printing out a copy as needed. When immigrants arrive to the U.S., most will have other forms of documentation. Refugee families arrive with a refugee travel document. As you can see in this example, this contains essential information, including full names, birth dates, and A numbers or alien numbers. This is all information that is necessary to look up a recent I-94. The travel document should also contain a stamp, as seen at the bottom of this letter. Travel documents expire after 1 year, but this does not mean a refugee status expires. By the end of the 1-year mark, they should have other documents like state IDs, social security cards, and work authorization cards. When combined with their I-94 document, these should fulfill any documentation requirements they face. If they need to travel outside of the country and their refugee travel document has expired, they would need to apply for a new one unless they have already obtained a green card. We will review that timeline in a moment. Refugees will have been given assistance in applying for a Social Security card and an employment authorization card while they are still abroad. The Social Security card and EAD card should arrive in the mail within 3 to 6 weeks. We use the term should loosely here since delays in these documents arriving happen often. Here is an example of an EAD card. It contains basic information about the immigrant, but also includes immigration information, including their USCIS number, which is the same as their A number or alien number, as well as their immigration status category. This card is less important for those with refugee status than other immigrant populations because refugees can use other documentation to prove their work eligibility. The key is for them to have a government-issued picture ID to accompany the I-94 and Social Security card. The EAD is useful in this regard and does make it a bit easier for employers who need to fill out an I-9 form, which is used to verify a potential employee is eligible to work in the United States. We will cover this a bit more when we review the employment implications later in this video. Traditionally, refugees have been eligible for public benefits including Medicaid, SNAP, or the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, temporary cash assistance for families with children, or refugee cash assistance for adults without dependents, as well as other programs for low-income households. Due to the passage of new federal legislation in 2025, refugee families are scheduled to lose access to SNAP in the fall of 2025 and Medicaid later on in 2026. It is unknown at this time how different states might decide to fill those gaps or not, but this has significant implications for this population. Those with refugee status apply for green cards at the 1-year mark, and then they may apply for citizenship after they have been in the U.S. for 5 years. Those who hold green cards will not lose their eligibility for SNAP or Medicaid. Special immigrant visa holders do not arrive with a refugee travel document, but have their visa inserted into their passport from their country of origin. The rest of these categories are the same as those who arrive with refugee status, except SIV holders are not scheduled to lose their eligibility for public benefits, and they do not need to wait a year to apply for a green card. Citizenship is still applied for after SIV holders have been in the country for 5 years. And now Cindy is going to return to review documentation and public benefits eligibility for immigrants who are parolees, asylees, or are undocumented neighbors.
Thanks, Barb. So on to parolees. Those who have entered the country through a humanitarian parolee program will have a letter in their USCIS account stating that their parole was approved and the expiration date of that parole. Upon arrival, they must apply for Social Security cards and work authorization card, which can take anywhere from 2 to 5 months to arrive. Those parolees who arrive from Afghanistan or Ukraine will continue to receive cash assistance, but will have their eligibility for SNAP and Medicaid removed on the same timeline as refugees. Those who arrived legally through the process for Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans have had their legal status terminated through the executive order as of June 12, 2025, and therefore they are not eligible for any public benefits. There is another parole program that some Cubans and Haitians arrive through that defines them as Cuban and Haitian entrants. This is separate from the process for CHNB and continues to grant them eligibility to all public benefits. Parolees do not have a clear pathway to apply for either a green card or citizenship. They would first need to adjust their status by applying for asylum, for example, or be sponsored by a U.S. citizen who is an immediate family member. Moving on to asylees, those who have had their asylum case approved receive a letter from USCIS. It looks very similar to the letter sent to those who have had their humanitarian parole approved. So as you can see here in this example, the document indicates the date of approval and all the conditions that accompany asylum. It also directs the individual to retain the original letter, but copies of it should be accessed in their USCIS account. It also lists the benefits the individual is eligible for. So in this example, it explains that the individual is eligible to work and provides directions on where to find a list of documents that can be used to prove work authorization. Because asylees apply for asylum when they are already in the US, they more than likely will already have Social Security cards and EADs. Like refugees, asylees have generally been approved for the listed public benefits, but SNAP and Medicaid eligibility will be eliminated on the same timeline as refugees. The timeline for applying for green cards and citizenship is also the same as refugees. There's an exception, and that is Afghans who arrive through Operation Afghans Welcome, and they're able to submit applications on an expedited timeline. And then we can move on to our undocumented neighbors. They may arrive with passports or other documentation from their home country. They are only granted a Social Security card or an EAD card if they apply for asylum or other more limited protective orders. And that case is approved to move forward. Then they will be able to apply for Social Security cards and EADs 150 days after their first scheduled court hearing, and the card should arrive by their 180th day. Some states do offer limited benefits for undocumented neighbors. For example, children in Connecticut up to the age of 15 and pregnant women qualify for Medicaid through a state-funded program. There are 14 other states who have similar programs. And finally, those who are undocumented do not have a clear pathway for a green card or citizenship unless they adjust their status. As we have mentioned in the past few slides, the eligibility to work in the US varies with immigration status. So we're going to try to sum it up here for you. Those newcomers that enter the country as a refugee or SIV are eligible to work upon arrival. Their employment authorization and Social Security card applications happen before they arrive and should be delivered to them after arrival. These documents can be delayed, and if that happens, refugees can use their I-94 document, and SIVs can use their visa stamp in their passport or their state ID to prove work authorization. Asylees, those whose applications have been approved, are eligible to work as soon as they obtain their EAD and Social Security card. Parolees situations vary. If they are Cuban, Haitian, Nicaraguan, Venezuelan parolees, they are no longer eligible for employment. If they are Afghan or Ukrainians, they are eligible. Asylum seekers, which are those who have applied but have not been approved yet, are eligible to work after 150 days of filing the application. The last item on this slide is a resource for clients from the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. It is called the Employment Rights and Resources for Workers Granted Asylum or Refugee Status. The document describes the rights and protections of the employee under the law, discusses parole and tax forms, and how to fill out an I-9 form properly, and also has a very helpful phone numbers for employees to call if they have questions or believe that they are being discriminated against. It is quite a helpful document. We recommend that you keep this document handy and you can access it with this QR code. There is a similar document that is geared towards employers. We have the QR code here for you to access this document. Again, it's helpful to keep this document handy because you may come across an employer that is not familiar with the employment rights of different types of immigrants. In the document, there is a link to a handbook for employers to help them avoid discriminating against immigrants. The document also lists the phone number that the employer can call for questions. And now I will pass it back to Barb to talk about some other resources.
Thanks, Cindy. As we mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, federal policies change rapidly, and the implications for IRIS clients are quite fluid at this point in time. Shown here are two very helpful websites that offer further details about the federal legislation that was passed and updates about how these new policies directly affect IRIS's clients. You can access them by scanning the QR codes, or you can refer back to the description of this video on the YouTube channel where the links are posted. Throughout this presentation, we also explained several of the documents immigrants from various populations rely on to prove they are eligible for employment, public benefits, and other important facets of American life, including services at the DMV. We have pictures of each inserted in the next few slides in case you need to find their images in the future. These include images of special immigrant visas, an I-94 document, a refugee travel document, and finally, a green card. Thanks so much for watching this review of the immigration pathways IRIS clients have used to arrive to the U.S.